What would you do if the woman you thought you had rescued was living under another's grave? And the friend you trusted most was the one who buried her. 3 years after Funke's impossible return, Femi learns that some resurrections are not miracle, but bargains sealed in blood. Now, whispers in the night, a child who knows too much, and the betrayal sharper than any blade pulled him into a storm he cannot escape. This is not just the continuation of a story. It is a warning. When truth and lies collide, even love may not survive the weight of what is uncovered. They say when secrets are buried, they do not rot in silence. That night, as Femi lay restless on his bed, a strange knock echoed on his door. 3 sharp taps, then silence. His chest tightened. Nobody ever visited him that late. Not in his quiet Ibadan street. He rose slowly, heart pounding, and opened the door. There, in the shadows, stood a man caught in a dark agbada, his face half hidden. His voice was low but firm. Femi, you have been digging into graves that should have remained closed. Femi's throat ran dry. Who are you? He managed to ask. The man stepped closer, his eyes glinting like a predator's. The woman you call Funke, she has told you part of the story, but there are things she did not tell you. Things that could still cost your life. Femi's fist clenched. If you know her, then speak plainly. What do you want from us? The stranger gave a bitter smile. What I want is simple. Stay away from her. Leave her and the child. And leave. If you refuse, then you will not see another harvest season. The man melted into the night, swallowed by darkness as if he had never been there. Sleep abandoned Femi completely. He paced his living room, the words ringing in his ear like a curse. Who was this man? Could it be the same shadow from Funke's past? The reason she faked her death? By dawn, his decision was clear. He could not walk away now. He had already lost 3 years of his life to lies and silence. He would not lose more to fear. But what Femi didn't know was that Funke herself had been visited that same night. And the warning she received carried a far darker message. If Femi did not let her go, it was not only his life that would be cut short, but the little girl's as well. The shadows of the past had not only returned, they had come knocking on both their doors. And the true storm was only just beginning. They say a man who hears footsteps behind him at night carries not just fear, but also question he cannot run away from. That morning, as the cold crowed faintly in the distance, and the Ibadan sky bled into pale grey, as Femi sat on the edge of his bed, his mind still heavy with the warning of the cloaked stranger. 3 sharp knocks. Those were not the sounds a man easily forgets. He waited until the sun broke through before stepping into Funke's room. She was awake already, seated by the window, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her little girl still slept soundly, her chest rising and falling with the ease of innocence. But Funke's face carried no such peace. Her eyes darted to Femi, and for a fleeting moment, guilt seemed to flash across her features. Someone came last night, Femi began, his voice low but steady. He spoke of you. He said I should leave you and the child or face death. Funke's lips trembled, but she looked away. You must have been dreaming, she whispered. Femi's chest tightened with frustration. Dreaming? His footsteps echoed in my compound. Funke, his words are still in my ears. He knew you. He warned me because of you. Tell me, who is he? Her silence was louder than any confession. The air between them grew thick, almost suffocating. Funke finally rose, smoothing her dress as though preparing armor for a battle she wasn't ready to fight. Femi, she said softly, sometimes knowing the truth is more dangerous than ignorance. If you love me, if you truly care for this child, leave it alone. But Femi shook his head. I already lost 3 years believing you were dead. I will not spend the rest of my life walking blind in shadows. If you don't tell me, I will find out myself. Funke's eyes glistened with tears she refused to let fall. She placed a trembling hand on his arm. Then you are digging your own grave, she whispered, almost pleading. Some graves are better left closed. The child stared and turned in her sleep, oblivious to the storm building around her. Femi stepped back, his resolve hardening. The warning had only fueled his determination. What he did not know was that Funke too had had knocks that night. Only hers came not on wood, but on the fragile doors of memory she had long tried to lock away. And the person who visited her was no stranger in a cloak, but someone far more dangerous, a voice from her past that knew every lie she had ever told. They say a secret may be buried in silence, but in a town like Ibadan, silence never lasts. By the third day after the stranger's visit, whispers had already begun weaving through the streets like smoke from a smoldering fire. Children carried pieces of it in their laughter. Women folded it into their market gossip, and men muttered it. The rumor was simple but sharp. Someone had seen Funke in places where she had no reason to be. Femi first heard it at the roadside buka, where he went to eat amala during the afternoon break. The food seller, Iyabola, lowered her voice as she set his plate before him. Brother Femi, are you sure everything is alright in your house? He looked up, frowning. Why do you ask? She glanced around, as if afraid of unseen ears. Because people are talking. They say your woman. They say she was seen near Oje Market last night, alone. But others swear they saw her earlier, on the old road by Kudeti, dressed in another clothes altogether. Femi's chest tightened. That is impossible. She was at home. Iyabola only shrugged. The eyes of the town do not lie. Be careful, my son. When shadow starts walking in daylight, trouble is near. He went home troubled, his thoughts heavy. That night, he confronted Funke. Where did you go yesterday? And before you speak, think carefully. For people claim they saw you in two different places at once. Funke's face went pale. She shook her head fiercely. I never left the house. Her trembling voice might have convinced him, if not for the sudden knock on his door at that very moment. This time, it was no stranger in a cloak, but his neighbor, Baba Karim, who stepped in, shaking his head. Femi, he said gravely, explain to me how I saw your woman at the riverside tonight, speaking with a man I do not recognize. The room grew silent. The child stirred in her sleep again, as though she too sensed the weight of Baba Karim's words. Femi turned to Funke, his heart thundering. If Funke never left the house, then who or what was walking through Ibadan carrying her face? They say children see with eyes unclouded by age, and sometimes their tongues, loose with innocence, reveal what even the boldest adults dare not confess. In the days that followed Baba Karim's troubling account, Femi began to notice something uncertain about the little girl. She was no longer the quiet, carefree child he thought he knew. Instead, she had begun to speak in whispers, words far too heavy for her tender years. It started one evening as Femi sat sharpening his cutlass in the yard. The girl who had been playing with stones suddenly looked up and said, Uncle Femi, do you also hear the man who comes at night? He calls my mom by another name. The cutlass slipped from Femi's end, clutching to the ground. He forced a smile, his voice tight. What name does he call her? The child tilted her head, as though listening to some distant voice. Then she whispered, Kemi. He says she can't hide forever. A chill ran down Femi's spine. He had never heard Funke use that name. When he confronted her later, she grew furious, denying everything and insisting the child was only dreaming. But Femi had seen the girl's eyes, clear, certain, and far too knowing. The strangeness didn't stop there. Some nights, Femi would wake to find the little girl sitting by the window, staring into the darkness as though she were waiting for someone. Other times, she would hum a lullaby in a tongue he did not recognize. When asked where she learned it, she would only smile and say, Mommy sings it when she thinks you are asleep. One evening, as rain tapped against the roof, the girl tugged at his sleeve. Uncle Femi, she said softly, don't make Mommy angry. When she is angry, people disappear. Femi's heart pounded. He crouched before her, searching her small face. Who told you that? She shook her head. I just know. That night, as thunder rolled across Ibadan, Femi lay awake, torn between two fears. The shadowy stranger who threatened his life, and the haunting possibility that the greatest danger was not outside their home, but within it. They say a half-truth is more dangerous than a lie, for it gives you just enough light to make you stumble in the dark. Femi had pressed Funke for days, his patience won thin by whispers, by the child's strange utterances, and by the shadows that seemed to follow their every step. At last, on a moonlit night, Funke sat before him, her eyes glistening with something between fear and resolve. Femi, she began, her voice breaking. You deserve to know who I am, or at least who I was. Femi leaned forward, his heart beat quickly. He had waited too long for this moment. Then speak, Funke. Enough of riddles. She nodded slowly. My name. It was not always Funke. Once, they called me Kemi. She paused, searching his face for recognition, but he remained still, listening. I was born into a family where shadows walked freely with men. My father was no ordinary man. He belonged to a circle. Men who traded not with money, but with power, secrets, and blood. Her hands trembled as she spoke, but she did not stop. When I was young, I saw things no child should ever see. Oaths taken at midnight, death sealed with sacrifices. And when my father fell, they turned to me. The money that I paid the price of his broken vows. What price? Funke lowered her gaze. Marriage to a man twice my age. A man who owned not just wealth, but lives. I ran, Femi. I ran and faked my death to escape him. The child you see, she glanced towards the sleeping girl. She is mine, but she is also the reason I cannot go back. Her voice cracked, and tears slid down her cheeks. I wanted peace. I wanted to be free. That is why I came back to Ibadan. Femi sat in silence, the weight of her words pressing against his chest. Yet something in her story ran hollow, like a drum with a hidden crack. She had confessed, but not fully. He could feel it in her trembling hands, and the way her eyes refused to meet his when he asked, "And this man, where is he now?" Funke swallowed hard. Dead, she whispered too quickly. Long dead. But Femi knew a lie when he had one. And if the man were truly dead, who then was the cloaked figure that came knocking in the night? The confession that should have brought clarity only left behind heavier questions. And Femi realized with a sinking heart that Funke was still keeping the most dangerous truth locked away. They say the earth does not swallow the dead in silence. Sometimes it whispers through the soil, pulling the living closer until the truth is unearthed. Femi had grown restless after Funke's half-confession. He wandered Ibadan's narrow paths like a man haunted, chasing shadows that slipped through his fingers. One evening, guided by little more than instinct and a rumor overheard at a joint, he found himself on the old Kudeti road, the one people avoided after dusk. The path was quiet, too quiet, save for the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. Femi's steps slowed as he noticed a patch of ground where the earth seemed unsettled, the soil darker and softer than the rest. His chest tightened. There were small wooden markers scattered around, some broken, some rotten signs of forgotten burials. Yet, in the middle of this desolate patch, lay one grave that bore no name, no marker, only a mound that seemed almost fresh. Something tugged at him, urging him closer. As he knelt, his eyes caught something half buried in the soil, the edge of a woman's wrapper, faded but unmistakable. His blood ran cold. He had seen that pattern before. It was the same fabric Funke wore the day she was said to have died 3 years ago. His hand trembled as he dug at the soil. The deeper he went, the stronger the stench of old earth and decay. Then he froze. There was no body, only an empty coffin rotting in the ground. Inside, it lay strange objects, cowries, blackened feathers, and a small gourd sealed with red wax. Femi stumbled back, his breath ragged. Someone had staged the burial here. Someone had wanted the world to believe Funke had been laid to rest, when in truth, the grave held nothing but tokens of dark ritual. Behind him, a twig snapped. Femi spun around, heart racing, and for a moment, he thought he saw the outline of the cloaked man watching from between the trees. But when he blinked, the figure was gone, swallowed by the shadows. He turned back to the grave, sweat soaking his brow. One question burned in his mind. If Funke's coffin was empty, then who had dug this grave, and why leave such charms behind? As he covered the mound hastily, Femi knew he had uncovered something meant to stay hidden. The earth had given up its secrets, but at what cost? For in places where the dead are disturbed, the living seldom walk away untouched. That night, as he returned home, his footsteps heavy with dread, Femi could not shake the feeling that the grave had not just revealed a secret, it had awakened one. They say no matter how far a man runs, his shadow will always follow him home. For Funke, the past she buried was no longer content to whisper through dreams or stir rumors. It had put on flesh and walked boldly into Ibadan. It was market day, the kind when the streets swelled with voices. Goats bleated at every corner, and the scent of fried akara danced with the dust in the air. Femi had gone ahead to buy palm oil, leaving Funke to wander between stores with her daughter. She thought she was safe among the crowd, but then she heard it, a voice, low yet sharp, slicing through the noise like a blade. Kemi. Her knees nearly buckled. No one here should know that name. Slowly, she turned, and there he was. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that glowed like coals, even in the daylight. His agbada was deep blue, embroidered with gold, but his smile was darker than the clothes he wore. "You thought deaths could hide you from me?" he said, stepping closer. "You let them bury an empty box and believed you had escaped. But here you are, breathing, walking, daring to live a life that is not yours." Funke's lips quivered, her hands tightening around her daughter's small wrist. "Leave me," she whispered, though the trembling in her voice betrayed her. The man chuckled softly, leaning in so only she could hear. "I will not expose you yet, but if you wish for silence, if you wish for your little girl to keep calling you mommy, you will pay the price you owe. Words does not vanish, Kemi, and deaths do not die with lies." Funke's heart pounded as his words curled around her like smoke. She could feel the stares of passerby, though none understood the storm raging in that brief exchange. The man gave her a final knowing glance and melted into the crowd as though swallowed by it. By the time Femi returned, Funke's face was pale, her grip on the child unrelenting. She said nothing of what happened, only urging him home quickly. But silence could not hide the terror in her eyes, nor the weight pressing on her chest. That night, long after Femi and the girl had drifted into uneasy sleep, Funke sat by the window, her body rigid. She knew the past had returned, not as a shadow this time, but as a man with power over her very breath, and the price he demanded was one she was no longer sure she could pay. They say when a man carries fire in his hands, he must choose between burning himself or dropping it on another. For many nights, Femi wrestled with a torment that stole his peace. He had uncovered too much: the empty grave, the whispers of Femi, the child's haunting knowledge, and yet every answer only bettered more questions. The cloaked man's warning echoed, "Leave her, or you will not see another harvest." One evening, as the sun bled red into the Ibadan sky, Femi found himself summoned by Baba Karim. The old man's eyes were heavy with pity. "My son," he said in a voice worn with age, "the shadow that follows that woman is older than you think. She did not escape it by faking her death. She carried it here with her. If you love your life, if you value the breath of that child, live before it consumes you." The word struck Femi like a blade. For days afterward, he avoided Funke's gaze. His heart torn in two. He wanted to protect her, yet fear clawed at him, whispering that her truth might devour them both. Then came the knock, another midnight visitor. But this time, it was no cloak, no mystery, it was a messenger. His face stern, his words colder than harmattan wind. "You want to leave, Femi? Then deliver her. Lead us to her and you will never be troubled again. Refuse, both you and the child will be swallowed." Femi's knees weakened, his mouth dry. He said nothing. But that night, as Funke and the girl slept peacefully, he sat in the darkness, weighed down by the heaviest choice of his life. To protect her meant facing forces he did not understand. To betray her meant condemning her to hands that spoke of death. When dawn came, Femi made his choice. He met the messenger again, his voice low, trembling with both guilt and desperation. "Tomorrow night," he whispered, "I will leave the back door open. Come for her then." His stomach churned as he walked away, but the decision had already taken roots. He told himself it was for the child, for his own survival. Yet deep within, he knew the truth. Fear had carved betrayal out of his heart. That evening, Funke smiled at him for the first time in days, as though some hidden weight had lifted from her. The smile pierced Femi like a dagger. She did not know. She could not know. But the night was coming, and with it, the end of whatever trust still bound them together. For in trying to save himself, Femi had opened the door to a storm that would not only consume Funke, but also the innocent child he thought he was protecting. Gather close, for what I'm about to tell you is not a story for the faint-hearted. The night Femi thought he had pieced everything together was the night his entire world collapsed. The wind in Ibadan carried with it whispers that sounded like accusations, and Femi could no longer tell whether it was the breeze or his guilty conscience speaking. Funke sat silently across from him, her eyes hollow, her daughter coiled tightly beside her. But Femi's mind was no longer on her. It was on the shadowy figure who seemed to lurk before every truth he thought he had uncovered. For weeks, Femi believed the story was about Funke alone. Her disappearance, her secrets, her haunting. But now, the cracks widened, and through them, a darker name began to surface. Someone had orchestrated the illusion of her death. And that someone had not been a stranger. It was a face he knew, a voice he trusted, a hand that had once guided him like a brother. The revelation came not from Funke, but from a chance encounter at a roadside buka. An old man whispered a name that turned Femi's stomach cold. It wasn't Funke who vanished. It was her sister who suffered. Ask your friend Sunday. He knows the grave that wears no name. At first, Femi dismissed it as drunken rambling. But the more he tried to forget, the more the words burned. Later into the night, Femi stormed into Tunde's compound. His childhood friend, his confidant, the man he trusted with his own secrets, sat calmly, as though he had been expecting him. There was no denial in his eyes. Only a quiet smile, the kind that hides daggers. Did you think Funke simply disappeared? Tunde asked, his voice dripping with calmly cruelty. Nothing happens in this town without me knowing. Her silence was bought, her disappearance planned. You were just too blind to see. Femi's knee trembled as betrayal settled like poison in his veins. This was no stranger's plot. It was the work of the man he had once called brother. Now, the mask had fallen, and the truth stood naked before him. Tunde had orchestrated Funke's death, and if Femi had not betrayed Funke already, his silence now would surely seal her doom. But how could he fight a man who seemed to control everything, even the shadows that whispered at night? The story was no longer about uncovering the past. It was about surviving the storm that Tunde had unleashed. And Femi knew, with every trembling breath, that the real danger had only just begun. Truth, betrayal, and fear all pressed together until they could no longer breathe in peace. Funke stood with her daughter, clutched to her side, her eyes darting between Femi and the door as if escape might save her. But it was too late. Tunde's shadow loomed outside, his presence undeniable, his authority unchallenged. He had come not just to threaten, but to end the story on his terms. Enough of your hiding, Tunde's voice, rang like thunder, sharp and commanding. Tell him the whole truth, Funke, or I will. Femi's chest pounded. He wanted to shield her, to protect the child, trembling like a leaf behind her mother. But his own betrayal weighed heavy. He had already tipped Tunde off days earlier, thinking he was saving himself. Now, the storm he had unleashed stood right before him. Funke's lip trembled as she finally spoke. I never vanished, Femi. It was my sister who paid the price for me. The grave you found was hers, not mine. Tunde made sure of it. Her words cracked like lightning across the room, each syllable tearing at Femi's heart. Femi's words spun. The woman he loved had been living under another's death. The friend he trusted had orchestrated it all. And the child, innocent yet knowing, stood at the center of the storm. Tunde's smirk deepened. So, Femi, what will it be? Will you expose the truth and watch her distressed by it? Or will you silence yourself and live as my shadow? The words shook as thunder cracked overhead. But the louder storm raged inside Femi's soul. One choice meant betrayal of love. The other meant surrender to darkness. And there, under the storm's roar, Femi realized his next breath would decide everything. Who lived? Who fell? And whether the truth was a weapon or a curse.